Hey everyone, Mike here in the BFH garage, and today I have an ARB problem, a compressor problem with my Jeep. I'm going to go on a wheeling trip this weekend, and I went to test my lockers. And I've discovered that my compressor is continually running about every 10 seconds it kicks back on. And that creates a problem for me because if you recall in my previous videos, I had a clutch gear that went bad and I had to replace that, and this might have been part of the problem. So I've got to figure out why this is doing this, figure out where my leak's at, and come along, and I'm going to show you how this works. So I have my compressor mounted underneath the hood right up against my emissions charcoal canister, and it sits right there. I've listened for leaks around the compressor. I'm not really hearing anything, so the very next thing I'm going to do is go back and take the air line off of the nipple that goes into the housing and check that to make sure that the air line doesn't have a leak between the compressor and the axle tube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my air line off of here, and then I'm going to pinch it shut, and that's going to let me know if there's an air leak in between the line and the pump. So I get this undone first. Take some vice grips. I can still hear that leaking just a little bit, so I'm going to get a different clamp to put on there to make sure I can get this completely shut off and see if it's the culprit or not. Now what I'm doing is I'm working backwards from the pump. I listened manually up there next to the pump and I didn't hear anything, so I thought I'd come back here. I'm going to clamp this first, and if it doesn't kick back on, then I know that the air leak is somewhere inside the differential. Now that I have this clamped off, the compressor's not cycling right now, so I can rule out that it's between here and the compressor. So the line is good. It's got to be somewhere either in the bulkhead fitting connection or the seal housing itself. It could be either the O-rings or the copper line has become compromised, or where that brazed connection is on the seal housing could also be the issue. So now that I know it's not this, I'm gonna drain the differential. I'm gonna hook this back up, and I'm gonna see if I can hear where it's coming from once I get the diff open back up. I have the diff cover off, got it all drained out, cleaned out, fired up the compressor, and I think you can hear that. And I think I found the source of my leak. I've tried listening up here. I don't hear it coming from here. Definitely coming from the seal housing area. So that means we have to remove the wheels, the shafts, the brakes, all that stuff, so that way I can get that lock out of there, get that seal housing out of there, and see whether it's the seal housing or see whether it's the O-rings. And if I recall correctly on this one, I put on new O-rings recently. My guess is I'm leaning kind of towards that seal housing. So let's get it apart and take a look. And I'm not happy right now. So getting back in here after these gears have been set up, I mean, these things barely have a little more than 500 miles on them. Not one of my happier things to do, but it's the nature of the beast. You go off-roading a lot and you tend to beat things up. These things are gonna happen. Some problems are gonna show their ugly head later on down the road. So let's get this out, take a look, see if we can figure out what it is. I've already broke the torque on these just in case you're wondering why these are coming out so easy. Now remember that you want to keep your bearing caps correct side to side, and you want to keep your shim stacks in the correct, on the correct side. So when I go to pull this out, I want to make sure that everything comes out and stays where it's supposed to stay. With the bearing caps off, give it a little tug, make sure your locker's not just going to fall right out. I put enough preload on mine that I know I have to force them out, but you want to make sure that your air line here is disconnected, and that as you start backing this locker out, that it's not getting caught up on anything and going to cause it to break. Remember my trick with the wrench here? Put a a box wrench the size of your ring gear bolt on there. You can turn the pinion. Here my drive shaft's still in, so I'm just going to put a little bar across there to help me out. I'm going to turn that, and it's going to help this walk out, but I want to make sure that I'm accounting for my air line as everything's coming out. So I got that above. So that's as far as that's going to go. Now I want to make sure this is not going to just fall out on me. Oh, and of course my wrench gets jammed right up against the gas tank. Okay, pull out the rest of the way here without this falling out. Again, keep track of those shims. There we go. All right, so right side over to the right side, left side over to the left side. And I'm going to get that seal housing off. And let's take a look. Oh, there's so much gear oil. Okay, so I have the seal housing out. Get a little bit cleaned up, take a look at it. So take a look here, get all this stuff wiped off. Take a look at those O-rings. O-rings look to be in good shape, and I don't like that idea because that means this is probably going to be leaking here. So wipe this off real good. You don't have to hook it up to a compressor, you can blow through it. Figure out where your leak's at. So if I plug the hole here and I can still get air out, then that means it's somewhere in this line. If I don't get air out, then that means it's probably the O-rings. And I can feel air coming out sideways onto my hand here. And I think it may be nicked up right there. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that or not. So right there, it looks like it might have been riding on that bearing cap, and you get just enough vibration over time. Now this has probably occurred before I did the re-gear, and it just now is starting to, working it back into the housing, it's starting to show its ugly head. So I'm gonna double check, make sure this is what the problem is. Without a doubt, I'm getting air coming out of there. And that sucks because that's right down where the brazed section is. And you can't really throw some solder on there because the brazing just won't take. So looks like I'm gonna have to get a new seal housing, and that sucks. These are about $100 a piece, so $110 somewhere in there. So hopefully somebody has one in stock. Unfortunately, I confirmed that it is the seal housing. I thought it might have been up on the copper tube and I might have been able to solder a hole shut, but it's actually cracked down at the base of the seal housing. So, need new seal housing, $110 that I didn't want to spend, but oh well, it's all part of the game. You got to pay if you want to play. So, we'll hit it up tomorrow and see if I can find something. Well, after further investigation, I was correct. The leak is in the seal housing here. And I thought the leak was right in this area right here above the braze line. So I thought I might have been able to put some solder on there and seal it up that way. That did not work, so I tried to figure out where the leak is, and it is down here in the brazed area, and you just can't heat that up like you can copper and put solder on it. That has to be heated up a completely different way. So in order for me to find exactly where the leak's at, I have to plug that line. I'm gonna take some brake clean, hold on a second here, and spray that into the end of the copper line here, and you can see it come out the other side, and you'll see where that leak's at. Oh, let me get it on the camera, there you go. You see how it leaks right out there at the base of the, where that line attaches. So I'm gonna go unconventional. I tried to source a new seal housing. Everybody's out of stock. Everything has to be ordered. We are looking at some pretty long lead times right now. It is, I said earlier, I'm trying to get out on a trail run this weekend because I really want to test my rear locker out and all the gears and everything before my trip to Moab in May. So I got a new seal housing on order, but in the meantime, I want to still get out there and make sure everything's working short of this. Now, if I was working on a friend's Jeep or something like this, I probably wouldn't do this, but this is my own Jeep, so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go outside the box a little bit, and I'm gonna try to put a temporary fix on that little joint right down there. And that temporary fix is, you probably guessed it by now, is gonna be a little bit of JB Weld. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to completely wire brush all this stuff down, brake clean it, get it completely clean. I'm gonna rough it up a little bit, and then I'm gonna apply some JB Weld, let it sit for 24 hours and see if that will solve my problem, at least temporarily. I'm not looking for a long-term fix. I just wanna get out this weekend. And it's not like I haven't wheeled in front wheel drive only before, so probably no harm, no foul, but if it does break, I'll just have to open it up and fix it when I get home. So no big deal. Let's see what I can do with this thing and see if it works. I'll make sure after I get all this wire brushed out really good, I'll take it over to the air compressor and I will blow everything out to make sure all of the oil, anything that's possibly in this thing is out, and then this will be a good clean surface for that JB Weld to stick to. I still have to rough up the surface a little bit, and I want to make sure that I don't come outside this face here because that goes up against that outside edge of the master shim on the outside, so I don't want to do that because I could throw things off as well. So I just need to get enough on there to stop an air leak, not too much that it becomes useless. So now that I've got it cleaned up, you can really see that hole now. If you're looking right in this area right here, you can see that hole right there. So I'm gonna get a little bit better angle. So that's where that started to separate. So I'm gonna put a little JB Weld on that and see if this works. Fast forward about 12 hours. The JB Weld's had time to set. You can see it right in this area right here. I kind of gooped it on there and I kind of smushed it in with my fingers as best as I could. I wanted to make sure that I kept it off of the face of this because this has to have a master seal attached to the outside before I reinstall it into the axle. So before I could blow into this line here and plug this one and air would come out right there. Now it's not the case. You could hear air coming out, but that's with the hole open there. Now I'm gonna plug the air locker hole. No air coming out, so I'm gonna call this a minor success right now because I still don't know whether it's gonna work under load with all the gear oil splashing around, all that stuff. I'm not sure how well this stuff will hold up in the differential. Like I said, I already have another seal housing on order, but this is a temporary fix. And let me tell you what, in the off-road world, sometimes these are the kind of fixes that get you through to the next trail. So I'm gonna give this a go and I'll report back. So I want to be very clear about one thing. This is a temporary fix in my personal case. I wouldn't recommend this to anybody else because the last thing you want to do is get on a trail, have something fail, then you're kind of stuck out in the woods. So understand, if you decide to do something like this, it's your own risk. Now, while it can work, it can also fail. The problem with things like this is that it'll work. For example, when I go wheeling on Saturday, it'll work and I'll be like, okay, I'm comfortable with it and I'll leave it in there. When I go to Moab in May, it could fail out in Moab and then I'm kind of stuck out there, not able to enjoy some of the harder trails. So again, this is a temporary fix for me to get me through this weekend. When my new seal housing comes in, I will change this out for the new seal housing, and then I'm going to be 100% up and running again the way I should have been to begin with. So the reason this failed, it has been in and out of this axle. This locker was actually in a different axle as well. It's been in and out probably half a dozen times, and working it back and forth. And when you're trying to get this line to come out, you're moving it back and forth, and you could develop a little stress crack like that. So I don't blame it on ARB quality at all. I don't have problems with these things, but because it's my own, I tend to be a little bit rougher on it for whatever reason, but I'm able to fix it. So again, your mileage may vary. So in the previous video, I talked about putting some JB Weld around that seal housing where it's brazed to just hold me over until I can get a new seal mount. Got that all set up. I let it dry for about 12 hours, came out here, reinstalled everything, and out of habit, I tested it and I actuated the compressor, which actuated the locker, and it kind of blew the JB Weld out because it wasn't set up all the way. So I wasn't gonna let that hold me back. I went ahead and just put everything back together, and I still went on the trip, had great success. The locker was still kicking on about every 5 to 6 seconds, which drove me nuts when I was using it. But now I have a new seal housing in hand, so it's time to get this drained, get that changed out. We'll test it and make sure everything works as it should. The first thing I did was verify that the new ARB seal housing is exactly the same width as the old one. That's what I love about ARB. Their tolerances are perfect, so everything's going to line up just fine. Now I need to transfer the shims from the old seal housing to the new. Then everything should go back together the way that it did before, with the exception of having to form this line. So I'm going to work on getting this line formed the way I want it. We'll get this locker back installed. We'll get it tested. New seal housing is in. I have the airline run over here. I like to keep a big tail there, so if something happens up here and cut it down, I can still use some. All we have to do now is test it. Let's take a look. That's the line, I'm sorry, the compressor and the airline. I don't hear any leaks now. Time to verify that we are engaged. You hear how that popped into engagement there? So now I'm gonna come over here and run the drive shaft. And both of my axle shafts are turning forward, so this is, as Borat would like to say, great success. Put some gear oil back in there, I'll be good to go for the trails again.